I'm going to go over AMD, MU, Apple, ChargePoint, and Unilever and give you some price targets for Wednesday. First up is AMD. We ended the day at $118.38. The day's low, $116.45. The day's high, $118.49. The 1-year price target is $132.59, a 12% return from where we are. This is where we landed. To the north side takes us to 2 standard deviations and an area of resistance and a possible take profit area depending upon where you bought in. That is 119.10. A gap forms to the upside at 119.89. 3 standard deviations and another possible take profit area, 120.03. And at 4 standard deviations, that is roughly 120.94. Note the gap closes to the upside at 121.10. To the south side, back at the middle of the trend or the baseline, 117.25. And from where we are, this is support. And I will anticipate grinding down along this line if we hit that or to go sideways. Now, to the south side of that takes us to -2 standard deviations and an area of support as well. And that is 115.43, 114.50, and at -4 standard deviations, 113.57. Looking left, note the bounce here close to -2 standard deviations at support and a rip through resistance. Falls back down, goes back up, and hopefully we will close this out tomorrow, Wednesday. And here, note the same thing, the run up at support, sell off at resistance, all the way down to support. Here again. And this gap closed to the downside at 122.11. I last talked about this stock on the 28th. And note the gap up, sell off at resistance, making our way back down. And this gap also closed out. I will extend that. You can see it touched right there on that red line, the red candle. So this gap is no longer in play, closed out at 119.21. The next one I'm going to go over is MU. We ended the day at $73.69. The day's low, 73.04. The day's high, 73.97. The 1-year price target is $83.96, a 13% return from where we are. This is where we landed. To the north side at 2 standard deviations, this gap also closes out at 74.24. Above that, at another level of resistance and a possible take profit area, 74.80, and above that, 75.31. Note this gap closure at 75.87. I do not think we will get that high up on Wednesday, but hopefully by the end of the week. Now to the south side at the baseline where price goes through to the downside and to the upside. 73.26, 72.25 roughly, and 71.73. -4 standard deviations and another level of support and a possible buy-in area, 71.19. Note the bounce at support, and the sell-off at resistance. The 76.65, I believe, is an old price target. Yeah. 77.03 when I last looked at it in July. And again, it's been revised to now $83.96. The RSI is turning up at 53 on the 5-minute time frame. Now let's go to Apple. We ended the day at 193.42, up more than 2%. The day's low, 190.18. The day's high, 194.40. To the north side from where we are takes us to 2 standard deviations and resistance. If we hit this line, I will anticipate a sell-off as people take their profits, 195.68 roughly. Above that, another take profit area and resistance, 197.21. And should we be so lucky to hit 4 standard deviations, do not hold your breath. I don't anticipate it to hit this in one day. 198.72. The 1-year price target is 196.53. So we are pretty close. To the south side, the baseline takes us to 192.67, 189.65, 188.10, and 186.57. Now, when I talked about this on Monday, I talked about this gap that had formed, and today we closed it. So I will remove this price target there. And we closed out at 194. This is resistance, blazed through that, hit resistance again, this level, and started to fall down. All right, and this gap closed out, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. This one also closed out, and this gap is still in play. I mentioned that. This week, I will continue to extend this until it finally closes out. This is the next target to the downside. We're not quite in that zone yet. This is the next one here. Takes us to 182.49 roughly. And there may be some more to the south side, but I will point that out to you when I take a look at the big picture. But right now I'm just doing price points for the next day. But always look at these stocks on the daily, the weekly, and the monthly, and you can see if they're oversold like Microsoft is, and when to get out, take your profits unless you are investing and you just want to let it ride. Now the next one I want to go over is Unilever. Well, actually, let me do charge point first. I recently traded this. We ended the day at $1.99 right here. Fix that. All right, to the north side from where we are takes us to a gap to the upside at 203. We started to fill it, but it is not done. All right, then to the middle of the trend is 210. 2 standard deviations and another level of resistance, 223, 229, and 235. There's a gap fill all the way up here at 312. It gapped down violently over here on the 16th on some bad news. This gap closed to the south side at 275, 251, and then we gapped down all the way to starting at roughly 202. All right, I did buy in at that level when I saw it tank. I'm a contrarian, so I got in when people were mostly getting out. I like to sometimes do the opposite of what everyone else is doing, and that's obviously taking a gamble, but I did it. Bought it here, sold out here on the 4th for a return of 9.43%. And I do have an order that I hope fills maybe around, I think I put in at 192. I might tweak that if I get a chance tonight, but the low was 198. And that's just right here. So could we on Wednesday get back to that and bounce? That would be just a penny. So I'm thinking maybe down here, the next level, 197. I'd love to get in again right here, previous low at 180, but I don't know if we're gonna get that low. But anyway, so to the south side from where we are takes us to another level of support, 192 roughly, and right here 186. And earnings and revenue came out. It looks like we are in the red. Not good. Hopefully things will start to turn around, but it will take a long time, I think, for us to grind back. The 1-year price target is 525. We may never get there, or it could take even longer than that, but always pay attention here because it constantly gets revised. Now on the RSI, we are turning down at 34. And the last one I want to go over is Unilever. I am in this for my mom. I invest her money for her. We ended the day at $47.74. The day's low, $47.69. The day's high, $48.04. Now, to the north side, takes us to a gap that begins at $47.80. We've started to go and climb up and then fell back down. Note the resistance area. But anyway, back to the middle of the trend takes us to $48.04. A gap fills at $48.35. That's just one gap of two that I'm tracking right now. Again, it started at $47.80. 2 standard deviations, $48.39. That another gap begins at $48.50, 3 standard deviations, and another level of resistance and possible take profit area, $48.58. And that gap closes out at 4 standard deviations, roughly $48.77. To the south side, negative 2 standard deviations, $47.67, $47.69. Gap forms at $47.34, and negative 4 standard deviations is $47.30. There's this gap closure at $47. This one will close out. Another one begins at $46.89, closes out at $46.29. We are not in this zone yet, but we're getting closer to this one to begin to the downside. But I think, well, we've got the RSI on the 5-minute turning down, but again, check it on all time frames. You can kind of gauge the direction we are going. But I think this could possibly fill Wednesday and maybe even Thursday, but there are some landmines to be aware of to the south side. And that does it for me. Thank you so much for watching.